Sometimes while making videos, I come across some things that I want to talk about, but that won't fill up a video on their own. So I put them on the back burner for a bit, waiting for a bit of a rainy day, so to speak. Well, that rainy day's today. Today I'm going to be discussing the lore behind the High Priest, and take a little bit of a closer look at the Warmonger. I would talk about the Kill Pillars too, to tie it all up in a nice bow, but they don't seem to actually have that much to them. They're pretty cut and dry, I think. If you want to skip straight to the Warmonger bit, there should be a time on screen and a link in the pinned comment. First up, the High Priest. Physically, he appears as an animate red robe, with a signature amulet of course, and a gun where one would normally expect a head. Outside of this, in the way of obvious body parts, we can see that he seems to have thin, blue, almost tentacle-looking arms hidden within his sleeves, something I never really took the time to actually look at until now, and I am finding kinda unnerving. The substance of his body is debatable, as he seems to dissolve upon being killed, almost like a Gungeon does when banished and the bullets passed. Kinda spooky, but not the weirdest boss in the Gungeon by far. As for the lore attached to him, we have very little explicitly stated. There are two Ammonomicon entries related to the High Priest, his own and that of the Gunslinger's Ashes. His description tells us this. He leads the Order of the True Gun, those who worship Caliber centered in the Abbey. They look up to him as their direct link to Caliber herself, which he is. He's directly stated to be, quote, Caliber's avatar in the mortal plane. Now, does this mean he possesses no mind of his own? I don't know. It's implied through what I'm about to read to you that he does possess his own mind and memories, separate to those of the deity that puppets him. From the description of the Gunslinger's Ashes, the precise methods needed to preserve a body with gun intact have been lost to time, but the High Priest, first of the gun, still remembers. A couple things to address here. Like I said, this refers to the High Priest as being an entity capable of his own individual memories, implying that in some capacity, no matter how minimal, he retains autonomy from Caliber. Then there's the actual subject of the description, preserving a body with gun intact. Supposedly a lost art within the Gungeon's walls, known only to the High Priest. But what does that actually mean? It sounds a lot like mummification, attempting to preserve a body after death. But why would this be mentioned in the description of the Gunslinger's Ashes of all things? The remains aren't preserved, they're ashes, they've been cremated. That's breaking down a body, the opposite of preserving it. And as for gun intact, the urn in which the ashes are stored is what serves as the gun, not whatever weapon whoever made the Gunslinger's Ashes was attempting to preserve. Perhaps a gun remains within, but I doubt we'll ever truly know. It's also possible that in the Gungeon, the gun is considered an extension of the body in its own way, a part of one's own being. I was telling this to someone before, and this wasn't in my script originally, but I felt I'd interject here, and they said that it really seems like they're talking about some sort of soul, that they're preserving a soul within a gun. And I would have said that, but it's never explicitly stated that that's what the process does, but it's implied. All we can really say for certain is that preserving a body with gun intact used to be a post-mortem procedure practiced in the Gungeon, and that the High Priest is implicated in it. Well, why? I have two theories for you. Either he practiced this art, or it was practiced upon him. Consider, as the High Priest of the Order of the True Gun, that powerful rites such as this would probably be deemed worthy of his time, and at the very least he may have studied it. Or, the theory I prefer more, he was a subject of it. Someone preserved his body, keeping his gun intact. A gun that we still see every time he pulls back his hood, still looking as good as new. We can already tell that the High Priest doesn't seem to have a substantial body, outside of those blue tentacle limbs. If there is a body beneath those robes, it would probably match those limbs, and that actually fits really well with what we've learned in the description of the Gunslinger's Ashes. A body, preserved for a long, long time, with the gun kept perfectly intact. How do I know he's been around for a long time? In the description of the Gunslinger's Ashes, he is directly stated as the first of the gun. And if that was too vague for you, the drunkard directly calls him the first of the Order. He's not just the Order's High Priest, he's the one who started it. He's been around the block, to say the least. Even the colour of those limbs fits with this theory. Corpses are often stylized as blue because it makes them look more dead, cold, and lifeless. Think Blue Baby from The Binding of Isaac. This is a stylistic choice that we see in Gungeon as well. with the Lich himself being an odd shade of blue for no real reason. This isn't the only explanation for him being blue, of course. There are slender blue races of people in the Gungeon's universe, but it's one explanation for it all. The final thing I can really say about the High Priest is the resemblance between his boss intro card and the Ammonomicon card of the Confirmed. They both have a collection of red lights under their hoods resembling eyes. This is the mark of Caliber. Her affliction, her blight, if you will. Those that she touches end up disfigured in this way. We know this thanks to the description of the Confirmed, and while Caliber isn't directly named, it's very heavily implied, not least of all by the fact that the Confirmed sprites are called Caliber cultists. Caliber has done more than just touch the High Priest. She uses him as an avatar, possibly in a similar way to how she possesses the final kill pillar during their boss fight, so it's no wonder that he wears her mark. All this raises a handful of questions, however. Questions to which I have no answer, but I think it would be fun to ask. 1. If the High Priest was in fact preserved himself, who did it? Was it Caliber herself? That seems unlikely. I can't see Caliber getting her hands dirty directly. Someone working possessed by Caliber? Perhaps. Maybe it was the gunslinger himself. An experimenter with guns and gun magics may find himself going down darker and darker roads in his studies. You know, one day you're duct taping makeshift cannon to Mega Dowser, and the next you're using gun magic to preserve someone forever so that they may be used as a puppet for a cruel, uncaring gun goddess. That's just how it be sometimes. 2. If the High Priest was in fact preserved himself, who was he before? He may well be just some rando we've never heard of before early in the Gungeon's lifetime. As for people we know in the Gungeon early on, we have the Gunslinger, but it can't be him because he's a bony boy. The Blacksmith and Cadence, who it can't be because they're still alive and healthy. Edwin, the blacksmith's father, who it might be because we don't know what happened to him, seeing as he was presumably lost to the Great Bullet, but it's all left very vague. Or finally, one of the Gunslinger's students. Because he had students who studied his magics under him, who, in time, became the Revolvenants, those dreaded undead sorcerer knights who stalk the Fifth Chamber. 3. Does he agree with what he's doing? I don't know, there's room for a tragic fanfiction redemption arc in there. Get on it, make me feel sad. Anyways, now that I've written an actual 1,000-word essay on the High Priest, I can discuss everyone's favourite wall, the one that isn't a mimic, the Wallmonger. Yes, he's kind of the opposite of the High Priest. Lore-wise, he's pretty scant, but he has a lot to look at, so we'll spend most of our time doing that. The Nevernamed channel, where I try to derive fun from staring at walls. Anyways, lore-wise, like I said, the Warmonger is pretty light. He was created by a collection of powerful gunjurers from the corpses of the dead Gundead left behind by the first Gungeoneer's conquering of the Hollow. Now, its description does say in no uncertain terms, the first Gungeoneer, and I don't know really who that could be. Perhaps the Lich? I get that he's the most successful Gungeoneer, but I also didn't pin him as the first. But I suppose it could work. Even if it's not the Lich, that really doesn't change much, so I'll move on. In appearance, the Wallmonger shares a sort of style with the Kill Pillars. Stony, with eyes literally flaming red. Now, the Kill Pillars look like this because they're possessed by ghosts, spirits, and whatnot. This leads me to believe that the Wallmonger might perhaps function the same way, built from solid materials, in this case corpses, and animated by spirits within. The sprites for the Wallmonger lend some credibility to this, referring to the Wallmonger as the Demon Wall. Of course, the sprite names have always been fickle and untrustworthy, but perhaps this could be a hint that whatever animates the Wallmonger hails from a more hellish source. As for enemies you'd expect to be in the Wallmonger, there are 8 bulletkin, 4 shotgunkin of unknown colour, 2 Gundead whose slugs can't be seen as they're embedded in the wall, and a Gundead whose slug appears to be missing, probably a spent. There's also a Gunslinger, Gun Cultist, Bombshi, Blobulon, Cubulon, Veteran Bulletkin, and Pinhead, as well as a collection of what look to be possibly Bulletkin missing not only their slugs but their primers as well. It's just the part of the casing that has the face, it would seem. Now let's get on to the weird stuff. The wall contains 4 disembodied human skulls, similar to the ones found laying around the Hollow. While they fit with the theme, they're still a little out of place, especially the last one, which looks completely different than the other 3. Running with that theme of human skeletons, we have a complete skeleton tucked away in the corner, but there nonetheless. They appear to be holding a shield and some sort of blade, which we all know is a bad idea. This sprite is actually a reused version of this skeleton located in the Gungeon acquisitions department in the Breach, where it looks smaller than life, almost like a toy or something with its yellow shield and sword. There are also two of these things that don't resemble anything else in the Gungeon. They look like smears of darkness with maws full of yellow teeth and glowing red eyes. I have no idea what they may have been before they died and were made into parts of the Wallmonger, and I don't really want to. Next up, two remarkably large bulletkin, one of which appearing with eyes similar to those of cats or snakes. I've already gone over theories about bulletkin growth in a video trying my best to make sense of their anatomy, so these aren't as out of place in the Gungeon as you might expect. Think Bullet King. There's also this thing. Similarly to the warrior skeleton from earlier, this creature's sprites are also reused from something in the Gungeon acquisitions department. Namely, this thing, showing us that this creature's natural colour is red. It almost looks like a runny Blobulonian with long tendril arms. However, the only regular Blobulonians with arms are Poisbulans, and Poisbulans are noticeably green. There is only one red Blobulonian with arms, and that's the tiny remnant of the Blobulord left behind after his defeat. Admittedly, there are differences between the two, slight changes in colour, the viscosity namely, but I think it's possible that these two creatures are evidence of two other Blobulonian generals who escaped to the Gungeon along with the Blobulord, only to perish inside. It makes sense that out of a massive interstellar army, more than one general would survive, at least initially. Anyways, that's a theory for another time. Let's move on. Anyone remember this video? In it, I mention an enemy from the game simply called the Bat that was used in the pre-alpha of the game. It looked a little like the Bullat, well, a lot like the Bullat, but a bit smaller and without a face. It also neglected to attack, simply moving left and right, dealing contact damage. Well, the Bat apparently wasn't completely lost from the game, as a single bat can be seen wound into the stonework of the Warmonger. Not a Bullat, a bat. My best guess is that they had already completed the sprites for the Warmonger as they were exiting the pre-alpha, and that those sprites just so happened to contain a bat. Then they removed the bat, replacing the bat-bullet enemy opportunity with the varieties of Bullat, and I'd say they just forgot that they left one in the wall. That, or it's a minute reference to a cut enemy from the game that pretty much nobody's noticed. Almost finally, we have this thing. I don't really know what this is. As far as I'm aware, it only appears in the Wallmonger. It kinda looks like something that'd be named Floob. I just don't know what this is supposed to be. Your guess is as good as mine. And finally, there are 10 faces in the actual stonework of the Warmonger itself, not part of any obvious enemy corpse or object. These faces aren't much, but they do serve to break up the Warmonger a little more and make it look a little more chaotic and full of moving parts, which I personally think serves it a lot better than simply leaving the stone blank. So that's that. The Warmonger is covered in little details, creatures we see nowhere else in the Gungeon, and a creature that used to be in the game but got cut. There's one final thing that confuses me. I've shown you all this intricate detail, but there's a small continuity error with the Warmonger, because its boss intro image would have you think that the only enemies entwined in its stone were Bullet and Shotgunkin, rather than the strange menagerie we see in battle. What makes this even more confusing is that in the version of this image used in the Ammonomicon, they do go into all the detail we see in the in-game sprite. You can clearly make out things like the Cubulon. I don't know, that's something I noticed a while ago, and I think it's interesting at the very least. Worthy of a trivia section on the wiki, I suppose. This video wouldn't have been possible without the help of my close friend Thomas the Bullet, who generously offered to edit stuff for me while my computer's essentially being held for ransom by the repair company. Long story. I've told him he can put whatever he wants here. By the way, so I don't know what you're seeing now. Maybe it's like a party rhinoceros or something? I at least hope it's not going to get me nuked. Thomas has his own little YouTube channel, and it's the least I can do for him after all he's done, for me to direct you to maybe check it out. He does weird and funny crap in a very unprofessional manner. His latest episode of Nutcase is honestly, I think, the best thing he's ever made. I've watched it like 3 or 4 times. So I'll leave a link to it down below. He's the nicest guy I know, and he deserves way more support than he currently has. Anyways, I've got to go down some country roads to take me home to the place. See ya.